starting with citizen comment on agenda items.
Hi all, thanks for your time tonight. I'm Joe DeMott. I'm here tonight to speak about agenda item 3. Is it still number 3? I'm here representing my board at the Wheat Ridge Business District as their board president. I'd like to first give a brief history of the Wheat Ridge Business District. We've been giving matching grants to businesses in Wheat Ridge for nearly 2 decades for upgrades and improvements to their facades, signs, landscaping, ADA compliance, exterior paint, and miscellaneous visually impactful projects. We have also used our large project grant in the past to leverage much more. This program has helped leverage millions in private investment and improvement updating of our aging buildings and commercial corridors. And its true purpose is to encourage these improvements in all buildings in the city. Historically, the business district granted nearly $90,000 in matching funds annually, but in recent years, this number has significantly lessened. It's been several years since we've asked for additional funding. The cost of construction has roughly quadrupled in the lifespan of the district's grant programs, yet our grant maximums have not. There's nothing more frustrating than a construction project to disrupt our lives and businesses, and we'd like to join the frustration and anxiety of the rest of the citizens of Wheat Ridge, not to mention the staff in our building department that we have in the coming months. Our board has unanimously voted to increase our funding maximums. We would like to work with City Council to encourage these kinds of major renovations in our commercial properties to upgrade and modernize their facades while doing major storm repair. Our funds do not and would not cover repairs of any kind from any kind of damage, but discussions with business owners lately have brought about the realization that multiple projects in the same few years is not unlikely but impossible. Therefore, they will be less likely to do a major overhaul after dealing with this year's damage repair. Offering a temporary larger expansion of our program, which we are referring to as our Facade Plus program, will allow us to carry out our primary purpose, which is to help get more businesses in Wheat Ridge. I'd like to say lastly that we do have current funding available and will be carrying out our current grant program, and encourage anyone to call any of our board members or local works with questions, or if you know of a business that would benefit from our services, let us know and we'll pay them a visit. Thanks again for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other, I don't think we have any other comments other than when we get to those items.
Did you have a section?
I don't think I've seen one back there. They're blank. Yeah, thank you, Mr. Dahl. There's a name? Nope, okay. Okay, let's move right to staff reports. Do we have any?
Nope, we can jump to item 2.
Municipal court judge, contract renewal. Would you like to come forward? Judge Randall? Now, do you want to start?
Sure. I think all of you know me. I'm Judge Randall. I've been here since '02, so I've been here a fair amount of time. I'm requesting renewal of my contract. By charter, it's a 2-year renewal, and I think the mandate from the charter is to supervise personnel and create a budget. And as the cover letter says, there's more to it than that, to be a presiding judge and to also act as a judge on a day-to-day basis. I think most of you know we're part-time. I'm here Monday, Wednesday, Thursday, but those days,
Pull the mic closer.
Are we?
Not very well on TV if you don't.
Okay. Because I'm pretty loud. But I'm here on Monday, Wednesday, Thursday. I'm here 10 to 11 hours because we have a full court day. And then before and after the court docket, I've got administrative duties, orders to write, warrants to review, that type of thing. Then I'm typically here about a half day on Tuesdays. So we usually have a director's meeting, and then I'll catch up on files and whatever needs to be caught up on Tuesdays. So court's Monday, Wednesday, Thursday. I'm here administratively Tuesdays. And then when we do have jury trials, which are somewhat rare, they are on Thursdays, the last Thursday of the month. Oh, let's see. The big issues lately are a lot of recent legislation. Here's a smattering of recent legislation, some proposed, some passed, that affects municipal court. So that's been significant lately as far as compliance with that, developing forms, developing procedures, and court manuals, and compliances from what I have to do from the bench to comply with some of these new laws. I think most of you know we're one of the few, there's only a handful of municipal courts that handle domestic violence. We don't handle a lot of cases, but time-wise, they're very time-consuming. They're difficult, complex, emotional. They're significant from a victim safety standpoint and a public safety standpoint. Anything else? Any questions?
Well, I think your appearance here tonight, is to have your contract renewed, and you've been requested at a higher salary. And I think that probably our council members may have some questions for you. They're all looking down. I'm not getting any hands. Council? Would you like
Just to quickly clarify too, this requires an ordinance by city charter, and so we have first reading scheduled for June 12th, and then second reading for June 26th.
Madam Mayor.
Yeah, Mr. Urban.
As it relates to your 2017, I'm assuming you've already achieved your 2007 goals, but as it relates to your 2017 goals and missions, your customer service action plan, have you developed that action plan, or what's the status of that? And
Yeah, it's more procedures for the clerks to follow. So it's procedures for payment plans, dealing with sentences, probation. We're also one of the few municipal courts that have a probation department. That's in part because we handle domestic violence, but I think it's also necessary from a case management standpoint to have a probation department. So customer service for the probation officer, complying with some legislative mandates provides better customer service. But it's mostly done in procedure manuals and binders on issuing warrants, inputting data, dealing with payment plans, that type of thing.
And then as far as your improvements to the website and increasing the customers' access to information regarding court services, what have you done to increase that or improve that access? Or
I did not do that personally, staff did that, but I did look at the result. They rearranged it. It was a little bit clumsy before, and they rearranged it so you click on this to find out how you make a payment. You click on this to find out what happens to you day one. Click on this to get forms. So it's just an user improvements to it.
Okay. And then the upgrading old technologies and equipment within budgetary limits, what types of old technologies and equipment are being upgraded?
I think it's office equipment. For instance, we got 2 new copy machines that are scanners, faxers, copiers, that type of thing, collators. I think that was a citywide project actually, but we'd like to get court dedicated software and upgrade and not use ADG and go to a more court specific software. I think anytime you're replacing older equipment, upgrading software, new phones.
Okay.
Ms. Duran?
Can you tell me what your procedures are if you have a domestic violence case or situation? You just kind of briefly went over it, but
Yeah.
What's the protocol for that?
Like when you first come to court?
Yes.
Kind of how,
Yes.
yeah, remember, it's mandatory arrest on all domestic violence in Colorado. So two things happen when you get contacted by the police. Well, you're arrested and booked and taken to the jail and booked, and you either bond out, and then I will see that person the next business day. So if you're arrested on a Tuesday, I'll see you on a Wednesday. That bond is returnable the next day. If you don't bond out, you're transported from the jail to court the next business day. And the arraignments are a little more thorough with domestic violence cases because of their significance. So you're given an oral advisement of right or a written advisement of rights, and I think people do not read those. So I give them an oral advisement of rights. So you get your advisement of rights both written and orally. I don't do that with every single case. The victims are present if they want to be. Victim outreach is present, whether the victim's there or not. Victim outreach is there. And just like any case, whether it's any criminal charge from that point on, or at least for arraignment, it's handled just like any other criminal case. I would say, and let's say the defendant pleads guilty, they almost all, unless they're repeat offenders, they almost all are placed on probation. And under the Domestic Violence Offender Management Board, it's an extremely extensive counseling program that always includes domestic violence, and it's open-ended. Back in the day, it used to be 36 weeks. Now it could be any length of time. Now, we only have jurisdiction for a year. I guess if you can't get it done in a year and you've done the best you can, you're done with it. But most people can get it done in a year. I would say most domestic violence cases involve alcohol use. So now, by state standards, you have to do drug and alcohol treatment. So the standards require one counseling session a week for domestic violence and one counseling session a week, a second counseling session for drug and alcohol treatment. So the sentencing aspect of it is very intensive.
Okay, and who's the program through? You said 36-week program?
Well, not anymore. It's
Okay.
it's open-ended. It can be any number of weeks through agencies certified by the state.
Okay,
So just not anybody can be a domestic violence counseling agency. They have to be certified by the state. And what we've done over the years is we know who does a good job, who's trustworthy, who's ethical, who has integrity, and then we will recommend, or the probation officer will recommend, say they live in Lakewood, we'll go, here's the one, here are the three in Lakewood that we can't really say recommend, but here are three that are in Lakewood.
okay, thank you.
That's
Yeah, that answered my question, thank you.
Judge, you have done a wonderful job for us for a number of years, and I think we're very proud of you. I know that some of our councilmen are looking at your salary range and realizing it's quite a bit higher than the other regional ranges. Could you, other areas as to why that?
I would disagree with that, and I did look at that spreadsheet. A couple of things to consider. A, I'm the department director in addition to being the presiding judge, and that's not common. I think the presiding judge in Colorado Springs is also the department director, and that's the only other city I can think of where it's that dual role. Typically, the court administrator is more like runs the court rather than the presiding judge. The volume in the cases that we handle, this is a city that's in a tough spot where we have a lot of homelessness, drug use. As you know, we have the hotels at Kipling and I-70. They generate a fair number of cases, as does the emergency room and the detox. Also, another thing, when you look at a spreadsheet like that, some of those judges are paid double what I'm paid. Now, to be honest, that's a per hour figure, and they're just working 4 hours a day, or there's some difference that sets it up. You're not comparing apples to apples, but I think it's based on duties, responsibilities. Remember, some courts just handle traffic matters, and we handle far more than traffic matters. I think in my mind it's
Requires
based
more
on the
knowledge.
comparison of this court with other municipal courts.
Ms. Hobby?
Judge Randall, thank you for that answer. That was actually my question, was how much supervision, I see that you assess the team members annually. You're talking about the different goals and missions of the court and the different like typical administration and department management that you do, and you had said that you think only Colorado Springs does about the same with that.
I'm sure there's a couple others, but not many.
I was also looking at, well, you can't just necessarily look at just base hourly rate, because you can look down the spreadsheet and see that there are some whose retirement plans are significantly larger, like in Arvada, or that like in Aurora, there's about 296 days under annual leave hour, or 296 hours under annual leave hours. So, you know, where we only have like 150 for our judge. So I think that if you look at it through the hourly rate plus the retirement plan plus the benefits programs plus the leave hours, then you'll notice that once you start extrapolating that it's kind of in the same range. And so thank you for putting together the spreadsheet. I appreciate it.
Yeah, and again, and Jerry might be able to speak to this, compare our docket with some of the other courts that are on that list. For instance, I fill in Thornton sometimes. This is a beefier docket or a beefier court than Thornton is.
That's another point that I wanted to bring up too, is that when you look at years on the job, we have Judge Randall at 14, Arvada has 16, Thornton has 29, and the rest of them are below 10. So keep that in mind too.
Ms.
Okay, thank you. I had a question about how the contracts are done in other cities. So is Wheat Ridge unique? And we sometimes are, that we have to do it different than everybody else. But how are these contracts done in other cities? Or by charter?
Fair question. My experience with sort of statewide is that the larger courts, and as the judge might say, the beefier courts that have a pretty vigorous, challenging docket, move more toward the kind of contract that you see here that has benefits. It has it treats the judge as kind of an integral part of the employment base rather than someone who comes in, smaller community comes in, does the traffic docket twice a month, leaves, and probably does 2 or 3 other towns like that, paid an hourly rate that really represents more someone that is kind of a contract, hourly employee. So I would say the larger courts would have contracts like this that are a little more complex and offer, frankly, more benefits to that person because they're, I'll return to it, an integral part of the city's organizational structure, really, as opposed to someone who comes in, sort of a technician that would come in, do that job, fix that pipe, do that whatever it is, and leave. So I think given the size of the docket and the nature of the docket and the employees supervised as a department head, this contract approach is the right one for our court.
So are other cities, do they have a contract similar to this, or are they employees of the city? I guess that's the differentiation I'm looking
Yeah.
for.
For a smaller city where the judge is in, twice a month, not an employee, clearly an independent contractor. The contract that you have for this judge says they're an independent contractor, but it's an independent contractor with some benefits is really the structure, and it's requires them to bring the kind of things to you that the judge has relative to overseeing the department. Those are absent in a smaller court.
Okay.
Mr. Urban?
To this point of Wheat Ridge having a beefier docket, is that related to Wheat Ridge citizens being more offensive, or how is it that we have a beefier docket in Wheat Ridge compared to other cities? What is the cause of that, and how do we refrain from being so offensive? I don't.
Here's my theory, or a little more than a theory. I think it's based on the location of the city. Accessibility, Denver's to the east, there's parks, there's creeks, we have a lot of retail, so theft is the #1 adult crime in Wheat Ridge. I think it's the geographic location of the city.
So is it that there isn't any sort of concern relative to the courts sort of settling issues out as opposed to the police figuring it out? Is that a concern, or is it something that, do you feel like you're handling the cases that you should be handling, or is it do you feel like the cases that are being presented to you are cases that you should be handling?
Generally, yes. Generally, yes. Criminal histories are getting longer. I saw a gentleman a couple weeks ago with a 60-page criminal history. That's a lot. And he had convictions in 9 states. I would say, as far as, is it Wheat Ridge people? Yeah. But is it a lot of outside people? Yes. I think it's quasi-transient, underemployed, that type of crowd has impact. The whole metro area. But again, I think we get some filtration from the east, from Denver, some of that group of people. We've become like county court. 15, 20 years ago, municipal court was a little quieter. I think now we're just like county court minus the driving under revocation and the driving under influence. So pretty much the same docket. It might be a reflection of just society in general.
And then let's see, what was the other question I had? There was another question, but I'll hold it for later. Thank you.
Would you mind, Ms. Wooden is ready. Mr. Pond hasn't spoken yet.
Thank you. Thank you, Judge, for your service and the packet contents that we have here. Just to try to summarize where I'm at with this, I've appreciated your service and the work that you've done and the updates and reports that we've received that as long as I've been here. For that reason, I'm inclined to recommend reappointment for the 2-year cycle. As for the pay, it's a little bit harder for me, and I want to foundationally say that I think that it's completely reasonable to ask to be compensated fairly, and then for us to be looking at increases, in accordance with performance and the market. On those basis, with getting, the information that we're getting, I don't feel as though I have as much of a foundation to stand on that. I can interpret the compensation package. It's harder for me to look at it and see apples to oranges, as I'm looking at this. I can certainly do the math and across the benefit packages and everything. So even if we were to look at that on caseload, on directorship, and those things, I still feel a little bit pressed on the increase portion of the request tonight, and I would pass on that and say that I'm not ready to go there. I think that's more because, perhaps even by your admission, that trying to understand this from an apples to apples standpoint, trying to understand performance as a basis for increase, and trying to understand market rate as a part of that as well, is a little bit. It's one of the unique responsibilities that we have, and it's a little bit hard to do with the information that I'm seeing, because it looks to me to be at a reasonable rate. And so I would at least, I'm interested in what other folks are saying, but I'm happy to look at the reappointment and to consider the increase as we can look at more information and really quantify it in a way that we all believe is apples to apples.
Mr. Urban?
My last one. I was going to ask, as it relates to the payment of fines and costs and the collection of those, and you're working with alternative programs regarding the payments of fines and restitutions and the like, do we have any way to measure those collections of those payments when they are not paid, and how well we collect on those when someone isn't timely in those payments compared to other cities? So what I'm trying to get at is how well do we collect compared to other cities and other municipalities, and when you're levying a fine or a cost to an individual, how well does that fine or cost get paid compared to another municipality or another court?
I'd say at least as good or better, but I think what's impacted the collection of fines is there was a law that was passed last year, and it says if you fail to pay a monetary amount, the court cannot issue a warrant. So basically, you can't get that person back to court to then initiate a contempt process. So if you don't pay a fine, and then I can't find you and have you served to come back to court, you don't pay that fine. You get out of, you don't pay the fine. You're dodging that. Also, there's been legislation that leans towards, and I agree with this legislation, alternative sentencing. So treatment, counseling, sobriety, classes, that type of the community service, rather than paying a fine. So you may have a fine, but it's suspended on the condition for juveniles, you get your high school diploma, or for an addict, that you get an evaluation, get treatment, and provide clean UAs. So that impacts, revenue goes down.
And so the trained collections investigators, what is that?
That is, with that legislation about not issuing a bench warrant, that's pushed the courts towards having a collections, it's really a collections person that does nothing but set up payment plans, remind people that they have a payment due. They set up the plan based on their income and expenses. It's just a collection agent.
Would that be out of your reach then?
You mean as far as being able
And I
to
may have asked that wrong.
collect
The fine.
yeah, we are, that reminds me, we're going to take on a collection agency pretty soon. So the legislation says don't issue warrants for people that don't pay, but we recommend that you send them to a collection agency. So that may help increase the collection of fines.
So not understanding the process at all, can we sell that quote-unquote debt to a collection
I
agency?
believe so. Jerry might, I think he agrees. Some cities have done that. Yeah.
Right. But what I'd like to avoid is a situation where we're spending the court's time and energy above and beyond the cost of the fine to collect a fine. So I don't want to spend $150 of the court's time to collect a $100 fine.
Right, and that's a balance I have too. So every day I'll look at a file, and if it's someone that either I know they're transient or unemployable or unemployed, and they're chronic and they owe $75, I just close those out. I'm not going to attempt to bring that person back to court. A, I can't find them. They probably live in a tent down by the river. And B, even if I bring them back to court, there's a contempt process you have to go through. It's like having a miniature trial, and the city has elements that they have to prove. And even then, that you have to overcome that hurdle. And then all you can do is fine them in contempt and maybe jail them, and they still don't have to pay.
Right.
I mean, you can go to jail and refuse to pay and go through that process again. It's frustrating.
At this point in council, we have one expression of retaining the judge for another 2 years, some iffy as far as the add additional payment to the judge based on wanting more information. Where are the rest of you? Monica, you have a question for us?
Just a couple. With the collection agency, what's their percentage, do we know? Because I know that they take a percentage of what's collected.
Oh, yeah.
Well, it'll be a matter of what we negotiate in a contract with them.
Okay.
I haven't dealt with a lot of collections agencies over the decades, but my recollection is it's, 25% they retain.
Okay.
And I'm within 10% of what the real number is. There's probably also a sliding scale, as I now recall. If there's money right away from the first letter, then they retain less. And the more effort they have to put into it,
The more they get.
the larger the percentage, and that makes sense.
Okay, that gives me an idea. One other question is, about how many hours a week do you spend in other jurisdictions in the city? Like you said, you worked in Thornton.
Yeah, very. Well, starting pretty soon, the judge in Thornton has cancer, and he's not going to be working for a long time. So probably I'm going to be out there a couple times a month. But in the past few years, maybe twice a year. But I'm also, believe it or not, the E470 tollway has a court. It's an administrative court. So if you don't pay your toll and you would like to have a hearing on the issue of not paying your toll, I'm the judge for that. Now, we have 2 hearings a year, and I probably go out there about 4 hours a month. But they do have I'm out there more than I'm in Thornton.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Ms. Wooden, not Ms. Wooden, sorry. Hoppy.
Yeah, I'd like to express my support in recontracting with Judge Randall for 2 years. I'd also like to express my support for the 3% raise. And if you just pick one other city, which I just picked Thornton, and you look at, although the base hourly rate is lower, as you look across the line, you'll see that judge is making a significant amount of more through their benefits. And then if you can extrapolate that down into days and hours, then he's making more than what we are currently paying our judge. 424 hours of leave. That's 53 8-hour days. Just to, just kind of bring that back, where we have 150 for our judge. That's 18 8-hour days. So I support both the 2-year renewal and the 3% increase.
Ms. Wooden.
I guess my question relates to our caseload. Is there a point in time where we consider adding personnel? I mean, getting another judge, or? I mean, at what point is this too much?
A half day a week or a day a week rather than adding another judge.
Mm-hmm.
I think staff prefer 1 rather than 2 judges because they get used to how that judge operates. Yeah, but we do have, currently we could add Tuesdays and Fridays. I don't think it's necessary yet.
Mm-hmm. But that's something to consider as things change.
Some new things that are going, well, if you folks want to do it, there's going to be a new driving under revocation that municipal court can handle. So it's going to be a driving under revocation. If it's just based on the non-payment of a fine, that is where I have some muscle. I can suspend or notify DMV that someone hasn't paid a traffic fine. And then if that license is suspended for non-payment, there's the state legislature has authorized municipal court to enact a driving under revocation just for that circumstance. I think it's going to be a 3-point traffic infraction. And there's also, there was the driving under revocation, and we're going to start expunging juvenile criminal records. I believe that goes into effect August 1st. State court was doing it, now municipal court will be doing it. But again, that's not going to add, I don't think that's going to add even a half day a week.
And
You know-
before you do that, I want to. Jerry, can you speak to the conflicts that we found within the judge's current contract and our charter and code? And you're going to make those changes, right, in the ordinance? Remember, there was an issue with I think his charter called him one thing, an independent contractor or something, but our code or charter requires something different.
Yep.
Do you remember that piece? I'm sorry to put you on the spot.
Yeah, I'm sorry that you have.
I have. I thought you already did that in the ordinance. Maybe I haven't
Yeah.
seen the ordinance yet.
I've gone through the contract and added a couple of things. There is, and I'll certainly make sure that the charter language is reflected. I think I have done that. And so the contract that you see, council, as an attachment to the ordinance at your next meeting will be slightly expanded. The judge has given me 3 articles around no ex parte contacts, as sort of just as judicial conduct that I support, judicial ethics that I'll plug in. Certainly make sure that we are consistent with the charter. This gives me the opportunity to also mention that the IRS has been out there around the country occasionally looking at independent contractors that sort of walk, talk, and act like employees, and have said, well, wait a minute, have you been withholding income, have you been doing the proper withholding as if this person were an employee? And there's a whole sort of body of law developing around how you make certain that an independent contractor that does have employee-like roles, as you've just heard the judge have, is not exposed to that potential liability. The IRS is kind of, they will choose a jurisdiction to make an example of. I think it was Trinidad a couple of years ago. And then they go away and they're busy in Utah or something. So what I want to do is spend a little time possibly adding some protective language to the degree we can in this contract to insulate us from that. That's one other thing that is on my list to do before you see this attached to your to the ordinance. This does give me the opportunity also to ask the judge maybe to speak to 2 things that I know has come up by council members speaking to me over the years, and that is code enforcement cases that end up in court. We have, of course, our administrative enforcement process that's pretty effective and has been diverting a lot of those cases and processing them pretty quickly. But some still end up in court, and I know that council expresses to me, and I'm sure you've heard it, the frustration of their constituents that, that derelict house stays that way long after there's been a complaint and it's gone to court, and how come it's taking so long? So you might address that. And I've got one other question that it will not trap you, but that one you might, because I know it has been mentioned, it hasn't been asked yet tonight, but I really think this is your chance, because they don't see it ever except now, to address that. I would ask the chair.
Yeah, and I can't address any one particular case. I'm not ethically allowed to do that, but I can definitely give you a general overview. But before I do that, a couple other things to toot my own horn. I am past president of the Municipal Judges Association, so you're elected to that. Also, I write twice a year. When all the judges get together twice a year, the very first thing we do is sit around like this, and people ask, the new judges ask questions. Well, one of the judges has to do the legal research I'm still not. Okay. I answer all those questions, so it's typically, I'd say, 25 to 30 questions. So twice a year, the other judges ask these questions. I do the legal research and give them a packet with the answers. And then finally, I'm an old timer. I started in Aurora in 2002, so I have a fair amount of experience. Anyway, there we go. So code cases, and really keep in mind any case. I don't care if it's a code case or any criminal case. It's the same due process. You don't accelerate. Well, you do accelerate domestic violence cases and aggressive dog cases, but other than that, they're all treated pretty much the same. And remember, whether you're guilty or not, you can always plead not guilty. You can always have a jury trial. You can always come up with lame excuses to drag a criminal case out if you're a clever defendant, and some are and some do. But with animal cases, most animal cases, and with code cases, because they're a unique animal, they're property oriented. They're not a crime against a person, they're kind of a crime against a community, crime against the city. Those type of non-violent crimes, the focus is on compliance. And I found if the city attorney uses a hammer, or I use a hammer, people, they dig in. Their claws come out and they dig in, and now they want a trial. Then they want an attorney, and then they want to do this, and then they want to do that and the other thing. That can drag a case out if you're heavy-handed with compliance-oriented matters. And in my mind, at least, with property cases, we want them to fix it. You want compliance. You want the house to be painted or the yard to be picked up. And remember, we do abatements too. So there's the criminal code process and then the administrative process, but there's the abatement process too, which is informal, fast. It's not a criminal process. What I'm saying is that's a pretty good process because it's civil. The catch is that we have to pay somebody to clean up that property. But the criminal code process is just like any other criminal case. And I know it's frustrating. I know sometimes you deal with things for months and years, and then all of a sudden you hear this guy's had 2 continuances and his jury trial is set out 2 months, and I know that's frustrating when constituents are complaining to you. But during that time, the assistant city attorney is working to get that person to comply. Typically, with most criminal cases, they're settled. If we had to go to trial with every criminal case, we'd have to have 3 full-time judges. So the focus by the assistant is to obtain compliance and settle cases. Now, I could send, if it were appropriate, if it met sentencing guidelines, I could send code violators to jail, but they could still not come into compliance. A sentence doesn't require you to come into compliance. You can still refuse to bring the property in compliance and do it up to a year in jail.
It's kind of hard to be in compliance when you're in jail.
Yeah, and that'll be your excuse when
Right.
when you get out of jail. I think it's try compliance first. Try working with that person first. And again, I know you might have been working with them for 2 or 3 years. You've had constituents complaining and chewing on your ear that whole time. And I've driven, once we've resolved cases, I can drive by and look at the properties. I've seen some, I wouldn't want that next door to me either. Either that.
I need in order this to go to be an ordinance, I need at least an agreement on retaining the judge further, as well as the payment that could be taken care of during the ordinance time, that's undecided. But in order to go forward, we do need some sort of a consensus as to whether we're going to retain the judge. Yes, we're going to recontact or that we can. Well, we could do that separately. We could do that separately.
And remember, you'll have an ordinance in front of you.
Yes, you'll have an opportunity. Right.
And I guess I would suggest that you don't have to necessarily retain the judge at this amount. You're not approving his contract tonight. You're hearing from him on the contract. And you'll have an opportunity it's up to you, but you'll have the opportunity to vote twice on an ordinance approving the appointment of the contract. But I think it'd be helpful to hear what council members think about that, so we
Exactly.
can see it.
Right. Ms. Hobby?
I'd like to ask for consensus to renew the judge's contract for 2 years and move it to first reading.
So as far as the contract portion goes, we're there.
Renew the contract and move it to first reading. It was everybody.
Recontract with the judge for another 2 years.
What I will do is put in the contract, get up procedurally, see me do this many times before. Procedural, you'll have your choices, both frankly, at first reading and at second, to approve the ordinance with the following amendment. Increase the hourly, decrease it, keep it the same, and it'll spring right out at you from a section in the contract, so it'll be easy to see.
That's good. Thank you, Jerry.
Thank you, Judge Randall.
Good to see you.
Yeah, thanks.
I don't know if we gave them near a hard enough time, though. Okay. If I can find my first page here, I've sort of buried it. Oh. Contract building inspection services, okay.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. Council members Urban and Duran asked to bring forward a discussion on a special appropriation to pay for additional contract labor to help out our building department to react to and provide customer service for the storm-related damage. And then also the second point was a discussion about a emergency supplemental appropriation in the amount of $300,000 to the Wheat Ridge Business District for expansion of their bubble, local works bubble and HIP programs, and I think, yeah, they're matching in the Wheat Ridge Business District's matching grant program, correct? I should have just let Zach read it, but now you can have it.
So now are we, where are we? Somebody
Maybe
want-
let Zach and Monica talk to it.
We just wanted to bring this to the table tonight based on both feedback from constituents and as well contractors and members of the business community that have come to us, and both those that have had concern relative to the process heretofore relative to the issuances of the building permits, as well as a concern about what we expect to be a pending backlog with respect to the inspection process as it relates to the the permit process once the permits are issued, and then on the back end as well, once the permits are issued, the roof inspections once the roofs are completed. And as we look back at 2009, it appeared as though the City Council at the time approved a $120,000 appropriation to provide contract labor to the building department to add additional services to that department to provide both contract labor and some additional services to either hire additional employees and other contractors to provide those inspections, and that's one of the things we want to talk about. But the other part, which Mr. Joe DeMott provided some background on at the beginning of the meeting, which was in respect to the Wheat Ridge Business District. But the first item was with respect to the building department and making sure that the building department has all the resources that it needs in response to the hailstorm, and making sure that obviously as the permits are being issued, that all the resources that it needs, that it has. And so I guess just to start off, how many permits do we expect to issue in this storm, or do we have any estimation of how many permits we're looking at issuing? Do you have any idea?
Yeah, thank you, Councilman Duran. I appreciate you putting this on the agenda. It's certainly in the forefront of our department's work right now, and specifically the building divisions, and significant impact for the community, and we want to be responsive. Quick answer to your question under bullet number 1 is yes. We have the capacity to bring on contract inspectors to meet the increased workload, which is significant, and we can begin to put a number to those. But to answer your more specific question as to the number, that's a hard thing to get your arms around. I think optimistic, maybe naively, when the storm happened, as we all watched our cars in the parking lot get destroyed, the optimistic side of me was hopeful that it might not be as many as 2009. The sole reason for that is you never know really kind of the swath, and there wasn't the wind associated with it that there was in 2009. And then finally, and in my mind most importantly, but perhaps again naively, we were having hailstones on relatively new roofs, because we put on 6,000 plus new roofs in 2009, and they're a lot more durable than the older roofs that might have been in place at that time. That said, I think it's probably worse, right? What we're hearing from the industry, and we've reached out to insurance companies and certainly the contractors, we think that probably the scope of the damage is probably worse. That we have 9,000 single-family and duplex structures in the city, and wouldn't be surprised if a significant percentage of those that takes us over that 6,000 number could be damaged.
And do we have any indication of what the average cost of those residential permits might be on average? I know it's not on a set price, but what would that average?
Yeah, it all depends on the number of squares, which is how you measure the quantity of the roofing material that's being used. But we have pulled some numbers over the last couple of weeks, and what we're seeing is kind of an average permit fee is a little over $200. And then there's use tax associated with those permits as well. But the actual permit fee, which is, of course, dedicated to cover the costs that we incur in issuing the permits and overseeing them and conducting the inspections, it's about $200 a permit. So we've put some numbers to what that might mean in terms of overall revenue, and we do believe that it can provide enough revenue that we can contract for the necessary resources to continue to meet our customer service expectations. And I can elaborate on all that as well.
Could you?
Sure. So we really didn't start to see the influx of these permits until really a week ago Friday. The 26th was the first day that we really had a dramatic increase in the number of inspection requests, when it went up from, we'd had like 45, and then all of a sudden we had over 80. And that was the day before the Memorial Day weekend. I think it started to become apparent to us that this was going to be a really big one, and perhaps bigger than expected. Fast forward to the next Monday, and again or the next Tuesday after the Labor Day, Memorial Day holiday, and again we had around 80 inspections that day. And of course, those are all associated with permits. So we're seeing, upwards of 70 permits being issued a day. We've peaked out at over 100 inspections a day. So the volume is fairly significant, and it's really just continuing to ramp up. We issued 95 permits today, I think 77 on Friday. And again, the inspections have been anywhere from low 80s to over 100 one day. So the volume is going to be there. We think we're going to need at least 3 full-time inspectors, estimating that the inspectors can perform between 25 and 30 inspections a day. We have one in-house inspector right now. I can elaborate on that too, but we have a couple of vacancies that we have on the inspection side of things right now. We do have contract inspection firm in place. We actually have a new firm in place as of just over a month ago. Our contract had expired with our previous firm, and those are 2-year contracts that automatically renew, but we'd been through 2 renewals, so it was time to go out to bid, and we ended up with a new firm. It's Charles Abbott and Associates they're based in California, but they have a new Colorado office for less than a year, but we've been real impressed with them in terms of their credentials when we interviewed them, so they did emerge as the top firm to fill that contract inspection need. That said, they are still in the process of kind of staffing up their Colorado office, but they've been working with us very proactively in providing the necessary inspectors to perform the work, as well as plan review, through some of their other offices throughout the United States. They're based in California. They have a significant presence out there and provide services to dozens of municipalities. They also have offices in Georgia and some other locations in the Southeast. So it's an established firm, and they've been doing their darndest to provide the resources, and we believe they can continue to. So we do think that we'll need to have at least 3 inspectors, 2 of those contract inspectors in place for the foreseeable future.
Do you have any idea how many roofs total we have in the city of Wheat Ridge? Because in my estimation, it seems like every roof in Wheat Ridge needs to be replaced.
Well, and that's what we've heard potentially. We have 13,500 residential structures, so that includes all the multifamily structures. And again, I mentioned more like 9,000 in terms of the single-family and duplex structures. And then that doesn't add on the several thousand commercial structures.
Right.
Those are all a little different. They're really going to be a more extensive permit. There's not the demand of, that you've got contractors here that want to get those done. It's really going to be more of a case-by-case basis. Exempla Lutheran we've been in contact with, they have extensive roof damage that we're working with them on in terms of how how you replace those membrane roofs, whether you can repair them in place or you have to, fully replace them or a combination thereof. So those commercial ones are a little more complex. But yeah, that would be the kind of total number of residential, single-family, duplex, and multifamily is about 13,500.
And but at 100 per day, that's like 160 days out.
Well, so we don't, we have one permit technician currently. We had a vacancy in a second permit technician that we were in the process of filling. We still are in the process of filling. We had held off initially in filling that permit technician with the temporary because we knew we were getting close to filling it with a permanent. But middle of last week, we decided we couldn't wait. So Charles Abbott and Associates, our contract firm, is also going to be providing, as of today, they brought in, so they responded within 3 or 4 work days. They brought in from, I believe it's from their Atlanta office, a permit technician to provide us services. For various personnel reasons, that individual, I think, is only going to be able to be here for maybe a week, and they're going to have to bring in someone else. So, we're kind of working on stopgap solutions with them, and then also they're trying to staff up their local office. We think for one permit technician, it's reasonable to process about 70 permits a day. The 95 today really means that you're working overtime. You're really stretching your labor. You're having people work through lunches, and that's fine. We want to deliver the customer service that we need to, but we also need to be mindful that it's a sustainable solution because this is going to take, if it's anything like 2009, and certainly it will be, if not worse, this is going to take 6 to 9 to 12 months. I mean, there's just capacity at our level, but there's also capacity in the contracting industry, there's capacity in the insurance industry, there's capacity in the amount of shingles that can be produced. So, we're all going to be stretched thin so that it just has to take place over time. If we bring on another permit technician and get them trained up, which will probably take, at least a week for them to learn our ADG, our proprietary software system, which has its quirks and nuances, and we want to make sure that they're learning that system well, so that we have good quality control. So we could potentially issue 140 permits a day through those 2 individuals. Now, if we do that, then you've also got to say, okay, well then that 80 or 90 inspections at some point becomes 100 or 120 or whatever that number looks like. So we need to make sure that they have the resources to provide us those contract inspection services on the back end, because one thing that we're committed to and have maintained is the next day inspections, right? I mean, we, as a city, whether it be roofs or anything else, we've always offered next day inspections and want to continue to be able to do that. It's of particular importance in the roof inspection process because we require mid-roof inspections. And the mid-roof inspections, we have some flexibility there in terms of what that looks like, and I can speak to that. But that makes it all the more important that you want to be able to maintain that next day inspection protocol so that when someone opens up a roof and starts it and brings it to near completion, that they can, close it up in, if not 1, 2 days.
So what is not to sound ignorant, but what is a roof permit? Like the process, like the process of a roof permit, what does that consist of? And when someone receives that,
Yeah, they're over-the-counter permits, so you need to make sure that they're a licensed contractor, and licensing requires that they demonstrate that they have insurance as well. The permit would indicate the number of squares, the amount of materials that they're using. Our approval would indicate all of our requirements for what the required nailing patterns are, what the required underlayment is, the ice and water shield requirement, the type of shingle requirement. All those things are noted either on the permit or on their submittal. The sheathing requirement is important. A lot of these older roofs, if they haven't been re-roofed in more modern area, they may have too many gaps between the sheathing material where the sheathing material may be of a certain age that it just needs to be replaced. So all those things are part of the permit process and then the subsequent inspection process. So the mid-roof inspection is really largely looking at what's under the shingles. If you come in with just a final inspection, you're looking essentially at nailing patterns, which is important because that's what's ensured that the shingles don't in the future become airborne. But the underlayment is really the critical structure of the roof, right? That you've got the required ice and water shield, the proper membrane, and the proper sheathing below that. So that's why we continue to think that it's important to have that mid-roof inspection and try to be as flexible as possible in making that mid-roof inspection not burdensome on the roofing contractors.
Let's let some of the other council members ask. Ms. Hoppy.
Ken, can you talk, you've been talking about just roofing and just roofing permits, and we have a lot of other building going on in our city. So can you talk about how that has burdened other processes? We used to have a walkthrough permit process for different stuff. So can you talk about how you guys have had to make those changes and what changes you've had to make?
Yes. It's still a little bit of a working process, and I can speak to a variety of things, but we've had to call off a service that we had provided, which is online permitting. So we used to offer online permitting for everything, including roofing. We've not been able to do that for at least the time being because the ease, which is the beauty of it, right, of being able to apply for an online permit means that we were getting potentially up to 70 or 100 of those a day, and we just can't keep up with that when we're getting to 70 to 100 of those in the office as well. So we've temporarily ceased allowing online permitting. Another thing that we've had to temporarily suspend is the request for 2-hour time windows. With this volume of permits, the logistical scheduling of trying to figure out, what a route looks like, for 30 or even 40 inspections a day, and then taking the time to call all those people and let them know what their inspection window is. It's just not, it's taking away from customer service to provide that customer service. So on balance, we have to take that away, and that's why, as it pertains to roof permits, that we're flexible in terms of the mid-roof inspection can occur anywhere between 25% of the roof being complete and 75% of the roof being complete. So if we get out there in the morning, you might be more towards that 25%, but still be able to pass if everything looks good in terms of what's under the shingles and how it's being built. Or if we get there later in the afternoon, or in some cases even into the early evening, you might be at that 75%, but that still gives you, a couple hours to hopefully finish up the roof. So that's kind of some of the adjustments that we've made. In terms of the processing the permits in the office, because that's what we've been doing, on Tuesday, again after Memorial Day, realizing what volume we were going to really be looking at, we ordered Patrick, I ordered it, but I forget the name. It's like a queuing system, right?
Yes.
The DMV version, right? I mean, take a number, and we have a digital display board that we acquired. So we got those overnight shipped to us. They delivered on Wednesday, and we got those installed on Thursday. So that's been helpful to manage expectations of where people are in line. The other thing that we've been doing is as people pull those tickets, and they've been queuing up well before 7 a.m. when we open, as early as 5 a.m. Once they take those tickets, we have actually our planners reach out to the people that are holding those, and we inquire how many permits they want to acquire today, because each one takes about 10 minutes. And then once we understand how many they're going to be acquiring, and we limit at 4 currently for each permitter, each contractor per day, a maximum of 4 permits, just so that we can get through as many people as possible and not, have one contractor want to pull 20 permits, because some of them do, or at least 10 or more. So that's kind of the protocol. What that has meant is that our building division hours are 7 a.m. to 4 p.m., and we quickly learned that we were going to not be able to issue permits up until 4 p.m. We initially cut it off at 3 and basically put people on notice that it could be earlier. Well, it's gotten earlier and earlier. We had to cut permits off today at 7:10 a.m., and again, we still process 95 permits. So that's just based on the number of people that were in queue between about 5 this morning and 7 this morning. They had 95 permits in their pockets, even with that 2 permit maximum per contractor. So we're actually tomorrow going to be implementing a 2 permit per contractor per day, at least as an interim means of making sure that we're getting through a reasonable number of people and not necessarily having to cut it off right at 7 a.m.
What's the benefit of that?
it allows more contractors to get in and get a permit or a couple permits and keep their crews busy, as opposed to say, okay, well, I got here at 5 a.m., these 40 people got here, well, not 40, these 20 people got here at 5 a.m., they all got their 4 permits, they took all the permits for the day. They're not going to use them all today, right? They're probably going to use them over the course of the next 2 weeks, depending on how many crews they have. So we think it's better to get 40 contractors with 2 permits that they might use this week, they might use over the course of 2 weeks, as opposed to have 20 contractors get 4 permits. So we're just trying to be reactive as things kind of change on a daily basis.
To get their work going. I've got a question over here from Ms. Duran.
What I wanted to ask you is, what do you need from us? What is going to help the process? I mean, even to be able to access permits online, because I've been called about that too from contractors.
Yeah.
Saying, we can't even do it online anymore, but if we go to different municipalities, we can. So what can we do to help?
Right. So the
you?
the online permitting, Patrick and I and some others actually chatted this morning. I mean, the online permitting, we realized initially that we just couldn't do it, right? Because people can submit so many of those, and we set up this false expectation that we're somehow going to get to those in a realistic time frame. So we suspended that practice. Having said that, we get it, right? That's a heck of a lot more convenient for contractors to be able to pull a permit online, whatever that process looks like, and not have to sit here for, be honest, right? I mean, some contractors are here from 7 a.m. to 3 p.m. or 4 p.m. They're here for a long period of time. It's not something I like, doing to people. I mean, that's tough. So we're evaluating whether there's some sort of a modified version of the online permitting that we could re-implement. We need to be kind of cautious about that and thoughtful about it so that we don't set up false expectations again. But we're thinking about that of whether there's a process that we could create that would allow roofing permits specifically to be submitted online. They may not get next day permits or same day processing, but maybe we could set up a schedule of expectations over time. So we're kind of working on the logistics of that. I was talking with some of my staff this evening about what that might look like. So we're going to refine that and see if that's something we can reinstate in a modified format.
And Ken, also maybe to answer a question a little bit more, and I know you've spoken to this a little bit as you answered other questions, but maybe, again, inventory what we have done already, and without council's approval. So we are going to have to come back to you for a supplemental budget appropriation at some point. We're trying to figure out exactly how much that's going to be. But so talk about, again, the building permit tech build that we brought on, and then also how many other inspectors that we've asked for, just to clarify that piece again.
Yeah, for sure. So Charles Abbott Associates, again, we're in the process of kind of onboarding them, but they've been super responsive. So I just publicly thank them for that. They've been doing their darndest to bring in resources from out of state to help us meet the workload. So we've brought in a permit technician that hopefully can get trained. I know she did quite well today. That hopefully can get trained to start issuing an additional amount of permits. So beyond that 70 to 75 that we think is a reasonable capacity for one permit tech. So that's one thing we've done. We've also brought on 2 additional contract inspectors, and we've requested a 3rd contract inspector so that we'd have a total of 4 contract inspectors. We've run some rough numbers to that. I mean, it'll probably end up costing between $150,000 and $300,000 when you add those 2 things over the course of perhaps 6 months, and that's based on perhaps 5,000 permits. So it could be more than that. We do think that based on the permit fees that are generated, if those continue to average about $200 in permit fee time 5,000 permits, that's rough numbers, that's $1 million. So we think that will have the resources there to be able to cover those services. There's a certain carrying capacity that we have to be mindful of. With additional staff becomes, there's additional management oversight, additional kind of administrative oversight. So there's capacity that we kind of have to be aware of, because we don't think we can do more than 2 permit techs. Just physically, the space needs are such that we have 2 people in a very small space as it is. And don't think it's realistic to get a 3rd permit tech in. So there will be some kind of self-limiting capacities as well. But again, we think, with those 2 permit techs and a total of 4 inspectors that, we'd be able over the course of 6 months to, potentially other limiting factors that we've already mentioned notwithstanding, be able to process those permits. And thinking back to 2009, it really did take the better part of a year to get through those 6,000 permits for a variety of reasons. I mean, winter comes and it's not appropriate to install roofs. And there's just capacity in the industry, there's capacity in the materials.
And we're in touch with some of the other communities that experienced the same storm, and I talked to the Public Works Director in Lakewood a couple days ago, who he's lucky enough to have a building under his department over there, and it's in Public Works. But on June 1st, I think it was June 1st, they were able to issue 180 permits, but compared in Wheat Ridge, we had close to 90. So we're keeping up pretty good, I think, for our size and the resources we have. And they do have an online system also, and I spoke to him about that, and he says it's still, you can apply for an online permit, but it still takes at least 24 to 48 hours. Their staff still has to review the permit and make sure it's correct. If it's correct, they send it back to the person who filled out the application, then they have to pay for it online, and then the staff sends another email with a PDF where they can print out the permit. So it's not instantaneously like some folks have come in and said that, I can get a permit automatically online in another community, and it's not necessarily that way. But as Ken mentioned, we're definitely trying to figure out how we can make our system work better online. Unfortunately, we have a fairly archaic financial management system that includes the building permit as one of the modules, and we've been saving money over the last several years to get something new, but those things cost about $1 million. And we're with ADG, which is unfortunately not a real user-friendly system, and we've been asking for upgrades to our building permit module, correct, for months, and there just haven't been. Years, really.
We've been working on a more web-enabled permitting process for, over 5 years, and it's just kind of at the whim of ADG, who's a real small, kind of boutique outfit, and it's just as other things become more critical priorities for them, that falls down the line. So, our web online permitting presence, even right now, is fairly basic. I mean, it basically means that you can download a PDF of a building permit application and submit it online, but you still have to come in and pick it up. You still have to pay for it in person. There's not online payment options, so it's still fairly clumsy, if you will, but still a time savings if we can figure out some version of that for people not to have to physically come in and spend 7 hours here, right? None of us feel good about that. We know that's not ideal customer service. We're making do with it right now, and thank you to the contracting community. They've been really quite cordial and good to deal with in a difficult situation, because that's a frustrating way for them to spend their time, but they've been quite accommodating, so thank you to them.
Sure, I do have to commend you guys for keeping the communication going on social media and everywhere, just about everything you're trying to do, just trying to just keep the communication open, and that's good.
Yep,
So thank
absolutely.
you.
Yep.
I have a question from Ms. Wooden.
Yes, I have a couple comments. First of all, it sounds like that before this event happened, we were somewhat short of personnel and we were waiting for people to fill positions that were open. So that's the way we were before this event happened. And then this event happened, and now we're scrambling to get people into these positions. And the fact of the matter is, these aren't rent and inspector position. These are skilled people that are hard to find, and I'm assuming that's why these positions were hard to fill, is because you want skilled people with experience to fill these positions. So, thank you for the work you've been doing, but it does sound like this isn't I just want the public to know, this isn't just grab a few people from an employment agency and throw them in there. It's much more complicated than that, and it's important that we have inspectors and permit technicians that know what they're doing, and so using this agency is probably the easiest and best way to do that. And so thank you for everything you've been doing, and I know your people have probably been working really long hours, and we appreciate everything they've been doing. On here it says back in 2009 it was a supplement of $120,000. It sounds like you're working on what we might need going forward, because if we're going to be looking at this for the next 12 months, I'm sure there's something for this budget year, and then we're going to look at something for next budget year, and how that might impact the budget, not only this year, but next year.
Yeah, we'll definitely have to come back to council with a supplemental this year, and once we get that figured out, and Ken and his staff are already looking at those numbers, and fortunately, we'll have the increased revenues to pay for it. Don't know exactly what the difference is going to be on that, but then we just started our 2018 budget process now, so hopefully we can factor that into the approval of the 2018 budget.
So at this point, I think we're just had a good review of what's going on, the realization that we do need to create some supplemental funds, which will come back, Patrick, with how much that is. And is there any other questions or?
You mentioned something about the numbers that you were expecting around 5,000 or 6,000, and my concern is relative to information I've received from both insurance industry experts and contractors, and just looking around. And what I'd like to see is, and leave it to others to as to what your thoughts are as well, but what I'd like to see is an estimate of what it would take to issue permits for every roof in Wheat Ridge, and what the building department would need as far as resources in order to make that happen within a 6 to 12 month period of time, because 5,000 to 6,000 permits wouldn't cover that. That wouldn't be enough. It would be, my estimation is there's somewhere in the neighborhood of 16,000 properties in the city of Wheat Ridge. So, and the swath of the storm reached from 6th Avenue to I-70, from I-25 to I-70. I mean, it was every roof in that area had hail big enough to be large enough to need to be replaced. So what I want to make sure of is that I understand that some roofs may not be replaced, and some people may not seek a permit that because either they may not be replaced, or for whatever reason may not do it in the next 12 months, whatever. But I just want to make sure that we're prepared, and that the number is somewhat conservative, that you have the resources that you need, and that we're not left flat-footed going into the winter. Because my main concern is that we're not known as Tarp Ridge, because that's what I see right now, is we see blue tarps everywhere. And that's what I want to try to avoid going into the winter, is any more blue tarps, and that's my main concern.
I can't speak to so much to the tarps, I guess, but I think a lot of the roofs that are damaged are, while they need to be replaced, they're not necessarily leaking right now. I mean, if they are, we certainly want to make sure those are a high priority, and they're, we're not having people with leaking roofs in the winter. That said, I think I don't think we have the capacity, or the industry perhaps has the capacity to get 13,000 roofs replaced in 6 months, right? So when we use that 5,000 to 6,000 number, I think you're right. I mean, I think it's more than that, maybe significantly more than that. I think, if we were to process 140 permits a day and do the subsequent inspections over the course of this year, through kind of October timeframe, we could probably do somewhere like 4,000 to 5,000 roofs. So I'm not sure in terms of budgeting and also just resources. I think that's why we're kind of using those numbers, understanding that in a month, just throwing out a number, I think we'll have a much better sense of the magnitude of it. Is it going to be closer to 13,000 versus the 5 or 6? But I think for budgeting purposes for this year, if we can come to council with a budget supplemental that's going to cover what we think it would take to do 6,000 roofs or something of that magnitude, and I think that would be appropriate just in terms of the carrying capacity of all the various systems for the balance of 2017.
I think that would be fair, just to understand both material-wise, resource-wise, across not just the city systems, but all systems, that how, what's the capacity to replace the roofs in Wheat Ridge? That's my main concern.
Any other? I think we're good.
On
Thank you
that.
very much, Ken.
And then talk about the business district.
Yeah. We had another item in here, which was the emergency allocation of $300,000 to supplement our current matching grant program and expand it to residential properties as well. These are large-term grants, I believe you were talking about. And Mr. Duran and Ms. Monaco.
I don't need an answer from council on this tonight, but one question that I anticipate may come up, particularly as we reach the longest days of the year, is whether our current limitation is from construction from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. We've thought about whether it would be appropriate to allow those hours to be extended from 7 a.m. to sunset. So when we come to you with a budget supplemental, or maybe sooner, I guess, to be thinking about whether, from a policy perspective, that has an impact on people's enjoyment of their homes. But we're, on the flip side, kind of all in this together to the extent that that the number of roofs. So that's something that we may be looking at. That we haven't had a lot of questions in that regard, but we're just anticipating that we might.
I guess to that end, Patrick, have we received any complaints relative to Ordinance 1585?
I don't think we have. I've been asking staff, police department. To my knowledge, we haven't. I complained Sunday morning when somebody woke me up at 7 in the morning, but I haven't heard any other complaints.
Perhaps we could limit it, not around your house.
Yeah, no.
Well, maybe the 7 a.m. thing on Sunday is perhaps a limitation, or the weekend or something, I don't know. All right, so that may come up as well as part of this supplement. All right, good, that's a good point. Okay, getting back to a additional supplemental to our current matching grant program. You've described it, did you want to add anything to it, or Ms. Duran?
I think it's pretty self-explanatory in the sense that this is not necessarily to provide any type of recovery for businesses relative to the storm, but allow for businesses to receive grants relative to additional remodel or improvements that they're going to be making while they're rebuilding from the storm. So we understand many businesses are making repairs and are rebuilding from the storm, and at the same time, they may wish to make upgrades and improvements to their property. And at the same time, we're expecting to see from this storm a significant amount of revenue from these permits. And what better way to invest back into our city but through the Wheat Ridge Business District? And that is the sort of the impetus behind the desire to have an emergency allocation of $300,000 for that. So that was sort of the reason to bring this forward, is wanting to do this in concert with this so that we're not wasting any time. And I understand the Wheat Ridge Business District is in support of this, and we want to. We don't want to do anything that they don't want to do, but we want to make sure that we're doing it in lockstep with them. And so the Wheat Ridge Business District has done a great job at managing the resources that they've been given heretofore. And as Mr. D'Amato mentioned at the beginning of the meeting, that they have been given an allocation on an annual basis, but that allocation has remained the same while construction costs have quadrupled over time. So why not allow some of the revenue that we are expecting from this storm to come in to allow us to reinvest that revenue back into the city in the form of grants through the business district, and that would be the sort of the reasoning behind why we're encouraging this allocation to the business district.
Okay. Ms. Hobby.
Thanks, Madam Mayor. First, I would like to, before I have any comments, I'd like to just request a correction in the memo. The bubble loan, the building up business loan, and the HIP loan, home improvement loan through Local Works, has been citywide for just over 3 years now. So it is citywide already. So I agree that we have aged commercial building stock that could definitely, we could benefit as a community to adding some sort of architectural difference to upgrade and update some things that you could look at that that could potentially be considered is just across I-70 there, the Arvada Marketplace, that was an old strip mall. They're now updating that and upgrading it and taking out pieces and making it look
All right.
better, right? Another place that you could look at where they used some architectural design elements to make an old strip mall look good is if you look down in Edgewater, right across from Sloan's Lake. There's, you know, the Starbucks and the sushi and all that down there, and they have used metal and different kind of architectural stuff to upgrade and update the strip mall. So I do think that we have some commercial buildings that would absolutely benefit from the opportunity to add some architectural upgrades to the buildings, and it would help our community. I think that I'm on the board of the Wheat Ridge Business District. I think that we do a very good job of making sure that we are handling the taxpayers' dollars in a prudent manner, and that we're not trying to just give away money. We're making sure that we are getting a significant, better looking product out of the grants that we grant. And we have, you know, kind of seen a little bit of a downslope on things like signage, you know, people wanting to update their signage. And I think part of it is that I can specifically say that there was one applicant who wanted to do a great sign change, but the amount that we have for our limits to grant them didn't make it necessarily financially feasible for them to still go through with it. And so now they're, you know, going to update the sign that they have instead. And so I think that it's important that we try to keep on top of trends and making sure that we're offering a good enough incentive to get people to pull some money out of their pockets. Some projects that you can look at that the Wheat Ridge Business District has done that have been really good, significant projects. Crest Kitchen and Bath, the facade for that was one. Compass Construction, before I was on the board, Compass Construction got one. And if you can remember our building, it was a dirt lot and half done. Dairy Queen was one. So we do have some really significant good projects that we've done in our community that updates our commercial stock. So I'm in support of this. I would say if people are feeling not comfortable with the amount of money that's requested, that I do know that as a board, we can, if we can, you know, get a little bit less, and then we have more applicants, then, you know, as long as everybody's open to us coming and saying, look, here are our qualified applicants, here are the great changes that they're going to do in our community, we'd like to request some funding for this, then I think that we can do some really good stuff with that.
Ms. Wooden?
So what do we currently have for the grant program? I mean, what's our current allocation?
45,000 a year.
45,000. Okay, and could you explain for the public who's listening the difference between a bubble loan, a HIP loan, and the grant matching program? Tell us what those three are.
Sure. So Bubble Loan and HIP Loan are through Local Works, so they're not through the Wheat Ridge Business District. The Wheat Ridge Business District is managed by Local Works, so they just do the administrative part of it, but Wheat Ridge Business District has its own board of directors, and it's not Local Works board of directors. So through Local Works, the Building Up Business Loan and the HIP Loan, and Patrick might have to correct me on this, but the last time I checked, I believe the Building Up Business Loan is up to $50,000. It's 0% interest for the first year, and then 4% interest for the remaining 4 years. It's a 5-year loan. The Home Improvement Loan, there are two different
Used for,
businesses only. The Bubble Loan
but
is.
it's building up business, is it a marketing program or is it a
No,
restructuring? or
sorry, it's all structural stuff.
All structural?
Yep, you can't buy
Thank
computers with it, or it's all structural stuff. The HIP loan, and again, if I am not correct about this, somebody correct me because this is out of memory. There are two different ways to get a HIP loan. There are two different thresholds, and one is if you're strictly just adding living square footage, and one is if you're adding living square footage plus like a bathroom. So it's about how much you're upgrading your home is how much you can get on it. And I cannot, off the top of my head, tell you the percentage or the years on it, but it takes a second seat to your mortgage. So
And
it's like a second mortgage.
Yeah, okay.
Now, the Wheat Ridge Business District, these are grants to building owners. So if you had a building and you, let's say your sign was an old pole sign and you wanted to upgrade it to a monument sign, and you've been in business for 5 years, then you can go in and request a grant for up to $5,000. And that monument sign is probably going to cost you anywhere from, I don't know, $20,000 to $40,000. So, and so it's gifted to you. You don't have to pay it back. So,
And then the business district is who decides who gets the grants.
yes.
Because I have a couple concerns with this, and one of them is that we're extending it to residential properties. And so I wanted to find out a little bit more about that. Or it's suggested that it's extended to residential.
And I believe that at the board meeting that extending it to the residential properties was taken off the table. It's not within our mission. Wheat Ridge Business District, it's about the businesses. So the residential piece is something that Local Works can handle through their programs that they already have. But for the Wheat Ridge Business District, what we're asking for is money for our businesses, for our grant programs.
Okay, so the bubble loan is funded, the city gives the money for those, correct? To Local Works, it's then administered by the Wheat Ridge Business.
Just the $45,000 a year and whatever else we've given in the past is administered by the Wheat Ridge Business District, which is also administered by Local Works. They do the administrative duties for Wheat Ridge Business District, but HIP and Bubble are strictly out from Local Works.
The Wheat Ridge Business District has no staff, just a board.
Right,
So we pay a fee to Local Works
And then
to
they-
staff it.
right,
For
right.
the grants. Local Works does all of their own stuff. They have their own board of directors, they have their own finance team, they have all of that for the bubble and HIP loans.
Okay, right. Just looking at this myself, I am interested in improving commercial buildings in the city. However, I would be more inclined to give more for loans as opposed to grants. In that have the business owners have skin in the game and an interest in the future of their property, and not something that would be, there's a storm, this was an act of nature that affected everyone, and that, yes, we're going to need to do some improvements. I'm going to need to do improvements at my personal property also, but more of a loan as opposed to just the grants. And I don't know if this funding can be split differently, and that some of it be grants and some of it be more bubble loans.
I would suggest that if Local Works wants to expand if their board of directors decides they want to expand their bubble and HIP loans, that they come in and make that request themselves. For our purposes tonight, I think that we look at just specifically the Wheat Ridge Business District request. In the Wheat Ridge Business District, it's a percentage of your total project cost, and I am not sure if the board decided on the actual percentage, but an example would be for facade, we can grant you up to 50% of your total project cost to a total of $5,000, $6,000, for a total of $6,000. So if your facade is going to cost you $20,000, the max you can get from us is $6,000. And this is what we're looking for is if they do architectural changes and update the property, then we can look up to a maximum of $30,000 for only 50. Joe, was it 50%? You'll have to excuse me because I was.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the
You can come to the table, Joe.
Joey, if you want to come forward to provide more information. I
Joe
think,
DeMott is the president of the Wheat Ridge Business District Board.
Yeah, currently we have a matching grant up to 50%. We've talked about this grant, what we're calling our Facade Plus, up to, we talked about a tiered system. 50% up to 10,000. We haven't perfected it. These are just some numbers we jotted on a chalkboard. 33% of the next 25,000 and 20%, I think up to 50. So if you spent 100,000, you'd roughly, was it roughly 22% or something? Something like that. It was up to $25,000. So I guess if you spend 100, you get about 25% back
And that's in the form of a grant.
in a grant.
So they would still have to invest their dollars into the difference, right? So they are
Oh,
making an
oh, yeah,
investment
yeah, they'd have
into
to,
their
yeah.
property.
Yeah, these are, I mean, we're talking about significant improvements in buildings.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think this is a great opportunity to do that. And I think to bring the community together to say, look, we know something devastating happened, but here's what we're willing to do as part of the Wheat Ridge Business Association. And here's what you're expected to do too, or district. So you're making an investment, they're making an investment.
Correct.
I think the goal for the evening was to take the temperature and see if city council would be willing and comfortable to, encourage some of our commercial property owners. Some of them are out of state. Some of them are elderly and don't really care to do much to their building as it is. And so if we could figure out how to incentivize them to update our commercial building properties, then in the long run, as a community, it would pay out better. We can't necessarily rent out, one of our units if it's only rated as like a C or a B commercial area. And so if we can increase that, then we can, bring in more people into our empty buildings. But so tonight's not necessarily like we're asking for you to approve it tonight. We're asking for you to consider it and for us to be able to come at a later date to ask for the money. And at that point, all the parameters would be clearly spelled out.
Which I think is a good idea, since good, I'm gonna have, Mr. Pond hasn't jumped in here.
I didn't mean to interrupt you. You keep going.
No, what I was going to say was, I think it's a concept that we're looking at this point, but the details need to be worked out.
Yeah, I think in those terms, to start from the very beginning, I understand and agree with the impetus to attempt to leverage, the events of a storm that then are putting people in a position to make decisions, and I agree with that. But I will say that I would stop short of tonight, putting my hands up for 300,000, because I think there's a lot of details that are not here, not the least of which is a further understanding of the impacts of the storm. Our ability, we just talked about in item number 1 here, about how to staff up and meet the demand, and although there were some numbers that were put out there, none of these numbers have been fully vetted. We do not know that we're going to make money on this storm. If so, how much? We don't actually know that. So I think those things actually have to be considered. As well as obviously taking things off the chalkboard and getting them on the paper and with a little bit more specificity to be able to understand why 300, for instance, is the right number versus 500 versus 200, or starting at a lesser amount that might be a more prudent way to manage our budgetary risk moving through the rest of the cycle, but allow for expansion of the program as interest started to go. So again, starting at the beginning, I want people to invest, and I want to look for the right incentives for that, and I think the notion is probably the right start, and so I guess how do we? It sounds like the business district has a little bit of work to do, and I don't know what you need from staff and Patrick, I mean, because I think this is, you know, with everything going on, obviously, it's stretching resources at a staff level, but clearly, you know, with all of the things going on and even other news that I've received in my inbox today, there's a lot of budgetary concerns that need to be figured out in order to make a decision at the magnitude of this. Right. So I mean, I don't know how much time it takes to figure out where we're going to be, with the storm and how our budget looks moving forward through the year in order to provide the other half of the equation to make a decision.
Patrick, you and I talked about this briefly, and there were two things that have come up. One of them is where we're at financially. We're at pretty close to our
Reserve limit?
reserve limit. And we've got quite a bit of engagement going with Fruitdale.
Yeah, I can speak to that. If you remember, we committed funds for the Fruitdale project from the city and the Housing Authority. As part of that agreement with Fruitdale LLC was that we would not provide full funding if it took us below our 17% minimum reserve level. I just looked at those numbers today. We are at that now, so we're going to actually have to stop giving them city dollars. The Housing Authority still has a little bit left of their contribution to give. The revenues that we're seeing from the storm permits obviously are unanticipated revenues, so that's going to help us make those payments for the Fruitdale project to keep us above the 17%. But at this point, there's not enough revenues brought in, but it's only been 6 or 7 days that we've been seeing revenues in from building permits. So we anticipate at some point that those will be in, but as Ken mentioned, we don't have all of our costs calculated yet, and I think he threw out some numbers of maybe a couple $100,000 potentially, maybe for contractual services. So that's about what we brought in revenues to date. I think we got about $250,000 of additional revenues today, but again, that's going to increase over time. I think maybe another thing that you were referring to, Mr. Pond, was I've talked to you all today, and you received a press release from Walmart. Walmart has made the decision to close their store July 7th. Our citizens may not have heard that or seen the press release, but just got that call today. So that's half of the revenues we're going to be that we anticipated to receive in the 2017 budget. We're not going to receive, and I can't give the exact numbers. That's confidential information, but it's well in the six figures that we're going to not receive this year that we expected to receive. So I would like to give this a little bit of time to see how the revenues come in on the building permits, and to see if those are going to help us cover the Walmart revenues that we're going to lose, cover our expenses that we're incurring for the storm, to see how much, and then also taking care of our Fruitdale obligation to make sure we have the funds. Council can always go below that 17%. That's allowed. That's in your policy. I think it requires a supermajority vote to go below 17%. To spend those funds, so that's a little bit where we're at on budget.
So you're thinking of a more cautious approach.
Well, I mean, I can't tell council today that we're going to have the revenues to do all these things today. I think we need more time to analyze our revenue picture and the Walmart situation. We don't know, even at this point, if they're going to even stay in the city and go to the Clear Creek Crossing project. They're taking that to Real Estate Committee on June 21st. But even if they do decide that, it would be a couple of years before their store could open. So,
Mr. Urban.
Thank you. So if we're looking at this as a correlation between the hailstorm and a desire to rebuild our city and an investment in our business community, I can see a need to tie those two together, and I would expect that to occur. So I don't expect us to go forward with that without seeing these revenues come in. That being said, knowing that we're seeing a certain number of permits being issued on a daily basis. My estimation is that we're going to see $300,000 in revenue from this storm happen before July 1st. That's just a given, that we are receiving a certain amount of revenue from the storm. The fact that the 2009 storm, we as a city received over $1 million in revenue, and we spent $120,000 in contract labor, $127,000 in cleanup costs, and there was a few additional costs on top of that, but relative to permitting costs and whatnot. But the fact is that this storm will be a net benefit to the city, no matter how it shakes out. And if it isn't, then we're doing something wrong. And the fact is that the costs of our permits and the price of our permit and the costs that to our city as it relates to what it costs us to execute those permits, there's a difference between those two. So we will see a net profit from each of those permits that are issued. So the fact is our revenue will increase from this storm quite significantly. And so what I'd like to see is that we tie the revenue from this storm to this project so that we don't use other city revenues for this emergency appropriation for the business district. I'm not expecting that we would do otherwise. So that would be something we could work into the agreement or however you want to write it out. But I don't want to necessarily spend money we don't have. I don't think that's prudent either. But I don't see how we look at the other side of this storm and say we didn't make any money off of this storm, knowing what our permits cost, knowing how many permits we're going to issue. The city of Wheat Ridge is going to make a significant amount of money off of this storm, and we need to take a certain amount of that money and reinvest it back into our city. And this particular emergency allocation, I think, is one of the best ways to do that.
Mr. Pond?
I think we should take all the money and reinvest it back in the city. But the point is that we don't know the equation fully right now, and so I don't disagree with you. That's great. Let's benefit from this. But earmarking it at this point with not enough data points, only for or right now for some things, we may be sidestepping the truth that we actually need those revenues elsewhere in the city, which sounds like it's going to be a blend of those two things. And what blend that is a little bit of the work that I'm asking to shape up on the city side. On the district side, I'm asking for a little bit more specificity about the program that I think both of you have indicated is forthcoming. So that's it.
Ms. Wooden?
A comment that I read today, and it was on social media about this issue was, our residents got hit by this too, so they're going to have deductibles in their insurance that they're going to have to deal with, not only in their homes, but their cars. And it was implied that preference was being given to businesses. And so I think we have to be a little bit cautious as to how we approach this. I agree, we should invest in our city and build up our businesses and encourage them. But being cautious not only to the equation of where the money's coming from and where it's going to go, we're not truly knowing right now what our losses to the city are. I mean, our buildings were hit, our police cars were hit. There was a lot of damage to our own city, so what are those costs going to be? What are we going to end up needing for our building department personnel-wise? And that we need that money right now. We need those people right now to be able to do the permits and the inspections and those kind of things. So as far as how we approach this, yes, want to encourage the businesses to improve their facades, absolutely. But being cautious and attentive to what our residents are feeling themselves, because they got hit too. It was just an act of nature. Businesses got hit, the city got hit, and our residents got hit. And how we approach this formula and where the money goes is something that we need more facts before we can move forward on it.
I'm going to call Ms. Duran even though.
So can you, our next study session, can we come back we should have a better idea with figures, with figures as far as our permits have been, just to get a better idea and a sense of where we're sitting.
Yeah, I mean, well, I think by June 19th is our next study session. We'll obviously we'll have a couple more weeks of data, and we could probably make some estimates on what we think our expenditures and revenues are going to be. It doesn't mean it's going to be final.
No, but at least give us
yeah,
a better idea than we
yeah.
have tonight.
Yeah. And there still is the equation of the Fruitdale project and how we're going to fund that, and if you guys want to go below your 17% or not, and then also the Walmart situation.
Right.
I mentioned earlier that we're going to have the revenues that we expected to see. We're not going to get this year, and definitely, I mean, obviously, we won't receive a full year's next year because there's no way, even if they do decide to relocate to Clear Creek Crossing, they'll be open in 2018. So, that's a significant chunk of money that we're not going to have in a year and a half, potentially 2 years, that we have to factor into our long-term budgeting. So, and that's the hard piece, I think, to figure out, by the June 19th. It's still going to be a fact, potentially. We may know if they're going to move across the street, I guess, by June 19th, and we can give you a better, well, no, they're not meeting until June 21st. So we won't know by June 19th. But even if they do, I think we just have to be prepared as a council and a staff and a city that we're going to be out Walmart revenue for probably a couple year period. There's a lot of good news still that the Clear Creek Crossing project and the Applewood Shopping Center, I think, both have a lot of opportunities with or without Walmart. But again, that's going to take 2 to 3, 4 years before all those revenues start coming in. So there's going to be a gap here that we need to be conscious about.
Sure, and I just want to make sure that we, support our business district, our residential too, and just be mindful of what everyone's kind of going through and not close the door on this. Just get some more information, some more figures, a better idea, and just stay open-minded to this. Thank you.
Thanks, Madam Mayor. Yes, our board does have some work to do, the Wheat Ridge Business District. We do have some work to do to kind of lock it down. I think that some of our sense of urgency is that at this point is when people are starting to look at, are they just going to make the repairs, or are they going to engage with an architect to make some updates and upgrades also. And to Genevieve's point, I do see how some people could consider it that we're giving the businesses unfair favorship, but we're not asking to help pay for their repairs. That's not it at all. They have to do the repairs, and they have to do the base of what they were already going to do, and on top of that, do additional upgrades and architectural differences. And so that's the difference, is that we're not trying to cover their repairs, because certainly that is their responsibility as a business owner, as a property owner. That's why we all have, the insurances that collect our monies forever. So I just want to keep that in mind, and I think that, I think that the reason why we're trying to kind of rush this a little bit is because we felt like this is a really good opportunity, but we still have to be able to market it. We have to be able to tell the businesses, hey, we have this opportunity for you, and we have to be able to get it out there in a timely manner where they won't go, oh, well, we just did our repairs, now we're done. So that's kind of why we were.
They won't get a permit and an inspection, and
Right.
Don't worry about it.
Well, and that's why I had included residences in this program initially, and that's what I had asked for, was that residents be included in this, that they be allowed to apply for this program as well. But some individuals have indicated that that's not acceptable, so that you got to have it one way or the other. But I think that what we need to be mindful of is that the business corridors and commercial corridors and the investments that are going to be made into these properties and the Wheat Ridge Business District program these properties' ability to take these investments, and the return on these investments are going to be able to generate additional sales tax revenue and additional revenues for the city by way of additional economic activity within the city, and that's what we're hoping for, is a flourishing of activity within the city. And I don't know if anybody saw the segment on 9 News related to the neon lights and some of the signage that was broken around Wheat Ridge. There's a lot of neon lights that could be upgraded and whatnot. Those are the kinds of things that I want to make sure people are able to improve and encourage as well. But I don't want this to drag on too long, but would individuals be okay with looking at maybe $100,000 start on this to get things going, and then see where we land in a month or so and go from there? Or is it something that we have to wait on this to see where we shake out? Or is it that we don't have enough information right now? Where do...
Instead of a $300,000 grant, is what you're saying?
Yeah,
To include just commercial?
correct.
So you're asking
Residential at
to add $100,000 extra that goes to the Wheat Ridge Business District for these larger grants, right? And these, once again, to repeat for anybody who's listening, these are not to be for the repairs from the storm for any business. What they are to be used for is if that business at this time would like to make their business more attractive, be it a facade, that's why we call it Facade Plus. I'm on the business district as well. Call it Facade Plus. The idea being that they're going to add this much, and there's incentive then for them to do that because the city is going to help do that. And we're thinking about trying to wait for 2 weeks. Part of this I'm repeating it so everybody understands where we're at. Wait for 2 weeks so we can see where the permits are going, and we have these other two problems, which are funding for Fruitdale, as well as funding for the fact that we are going to be losing a very large income source. So we have this to measure. The request was would you consider 100,000 versus waiting 2 weeks and checking out, looking further into the whole process.
And at that time, in 2 weeks or so, we can look at the extended amounts, depending on where we're at.
You mean basically come to a conclusion tonight about making it 100,000 and then in 2 weeks looking at it some more?
Yes, so the business district can get started with what it needs to, correct? Is that what you're saying?
Now, the
My-
business
Get
district,
moving on it.
My concern is relative to, as a lot of individuals are already working with contractors and architects and others, and not to say that things won't get done if we don't make a consensus tonight, but we want to make sure that we keep the ball rolling and that the individuals know that that we are moving forward with this, that we have a commitment towards investing in our city, and this is something that we want to see have happen. And I think a consensus towards an emergency allocation of $100,000 to supplement our current matching grant program and dedicate towards facade and visual impact grants towards the Facade Plus program, I think would be a good first step, and that we can come back and look at that in 2 weeks relative to what is our current balance or our current position in a few weeks.
I've got two people here. Mr. Pond, please.
Well, I'm not offended by that. I would be okay with it. Yeah, I mean, here's the truth of it. We're not allocating money tonight, or that won't happen until next Monday. So the truth is that I think that I'm okay passing it through tonight to be voted on Monday. I think that does require much more of a detailed information from the Wheat Ridge Business District, not just this one paragraph. And so, fine, let's pass that forward at 100. you know, that means that we're 3 weeks away at best of getting any additional funding forward, and, you know, and probably a little bit more. So I want to be realistic about that, because I think that there's, you know, yeah, we can ask for information 2 weeks from now at a study session, but it's not going to be until the week after that at a business meeting that we would be able to authorize any additional funds. I still feel like there's a lot of missing gaps. I suppose if everything tracks in terms of people putting together information and the other things, that we may find that it tracks properly. Again, you know, I don't want it anyway. I 100% agree with investing all of this storm money. I agree 100% in investing with the business. This still is a hasty ask, and so I do not want to be pegged in any way as you know, as trying to be a stick in the way of looking at, you know, the businesses. That we have a responsibility to our budget, if we, you know, and we have to do both of those things, and I think we need to be careful to balance that responsibility.
I was just going to add to that real quickly, just so that, again, as to be a stick in the mud, I guess. And for full disclosure, as I mentioned, we don't have enough money today to pay the Fruitdale project to stay above our 17%. We are definitely bringing more revenue in. We need about, I think we brought in about $250,000 right now of additional revenues above than what we expected from the building permits. We need about $500,000 total to keep us at 17% before we can continue paying Fruitdale. And so if we do 100,000, which that's council's decision, we would need 600,000 before we can start paying Fruitdale their invoices. So just to be clear that we can't pay Fruitdale their invoices until we reach that 600,000. And then if you do any more above 100,000, same thing. We just have to make sure that we're always at that 17%. Unless, I mean, council could, again, make a decision to say that we can go below 17%. I guess that's your choice.
I do want, when we bring this up next Monday, for all of those points to, you know,
Yep.
to be in the report, because I think we have an obligation. We sat up there and made a commitment to Fruitdale, which we are essentially lagging on right now, and that's somewhat embarrassing.
You know, we currently have, the Wheat Ridge Business District currently has $48,000 that the way it's set up is, as a board, we can decide to change our limits to our programs the way we want, and, you know, we vote on it, and we have the money that we can spend on it. So in no way are we in a desperate place where we have to have the money tonight. And so, but we really do want to just make sure that that we could potentially have the opportunity to, you know, get some people to really reinvest into some of their outdated buildings. And so, you know, do we have to move forward with a dollar amount tonight? No. But can we, if we can come to a consensus that we can support the changes to be able to try to find some money for it in the future, and you know, in a couple of weeks we can come back with something more solid and say, you know, this is how that process is, and here are our applicants, or here's the deadline that we're giving our applicants, or, you know, and that kind of stuff. But I just want to make sure that we are aware that if we don't want to commit any money tonight, that we will be coming and asking for some later, just to say, look, here's all of our qualified applicants.
That was what they decided upon, was to kind of talk it over with the council and get a feel for it, as well as the fact that there is, I was thinking it's about 45,000 available. 48 available.
You got this year's allocation already? Okay.
That perhaps they could support it themselves at this point, and then, as the council does look over the total financial situation, determine if there is more money for what could be a good investment for our city.
Because I think if an allocation to the business district happened on July 1st or August 1st or whenever that occurred, I don't think, it's not a cash flow situation, it's just a commitment level. That's just the that it's a concept level at this point. It's an understanding that this is something that the city is interested in moving forward as a concept. So I'll just ask that for a consensus that council is in favor of the Facade Plus program, and that we put forward a emergency allocation of $100,000 as a consensus. Not obviously can't do anything tonight, but just as a round number to start things off with, as a way to get things going, and ask for that consensus.
For next Monday. Is that part of your consensus to bring it forward Monday?
For next Monday.
I'm going to decline, and I'd like to say why. I don't feel like we have the numbers. I do feel like we have a cash flow issue. And having said that, I do support the businesses, but to make a decision right now on any amount of money when we don't have the numbers and when we don't know the cash flow, I think I have to decline.
Just to clarify, this is just a consensus. We'll come to council on Monday for a full discussion and disclosure
The consensus is
Report,
about
correct.
bringing it forward for the
on
discussion.
Monday, that's all.
Correct.
Not allocating any direct funds.
No.
Correct, I just want to make that clear.
Yep.
Thank you.
It's just to bring it for further discussion. Okay.
Was there a consensus?
The consensus
Yep.
was that we're going to bring it forward.
Okay.
that There's $100,000.
Got it.
Potential. You got it all?
It is 100,000. Yep, that's what they want written in, so.
All right, I
Got
believe
it.
we're done with that item.
Thanks, Joey.
Thank you,
I got
Mr.
One quick ask.
Mr. Joey.
It's okay. Can I start?
Yep.
One quick thing, July 3rd is a study session. July 4th is holiday. We don't have anything on the schedule. Do you want to cancel?
Yeah.
I will not be here.
I know, I don't think, we didn't officially, it's not officially canceled on the council calendar, but to do it, we have to officially do it, so I'd have to put it on the agenda for next week. So I was just asking if you want to do that.
I won't be in town.
Okay.
I'm going to play.
Is everybody okay with that? Okay, we'll stick it on the agenda. Thank you.
Are there any council members who belong to an outside committee that would like to report on it? We've heard enough about the business district. You're out. Genevieve?
I guess the only thing is we did have the open house for the DeAngelis Center for Community Safety, and the 20 people that were there had a good time and they liked their tour. I did want to make a suggestion, because we do have this center and because this center does have a simulator, that maybe council consider doing the simulation exercise, which is it the active shooter?
Yeah.
It's the active shooter simulation, and it's a class given by the police department. And I've done it before, and it's very interesting, and it really gives you a perspective from the policeman or woman's perspective. And I just think that'd be a really good thing for council to do, or just to consider, that we might consider going through that class, and that it would help us have a better understanding of our police and the things they go through and some of the decisions we have to make going forward.
To that, just somewhat related to that, I know other councils have gone through training relative to what to do in an emergency situation in council chambers. We've never really done anything similar to that in our chambers, so maybe if
Yeah.
something like that could be done here, I don't know.
Yeah, thanks. Zach, that's a great point. We do, recently, over the last year, we've trained every department for employees. So we have somebody in our police, and I think somebody else that goes around and does those. So we can add that to a study session or something. Does that work? Okay.
Let me add to Genevieve's. I've been through that training where they have the simulator. And basically what they do is you have a gun, blanks, of course, or it's electronic, and somebody comes at you or whatever. What's fascinating about it is the decision time. And in that decision time, how difficult it is to hit the bad guy because you're nervous and crazy and whatever. And it is a wonderful process because you appreciate what the policemen go who are trained to shoot and shoot accurately. And still, it's so hard for them to get that, you would say, well, why did they shoot him in the arm or leg? Well, sometimes they're just trying to save their life.
Raises your heart rate, for sure.
Very much so. Anyone else on outside reports? Well, I can tell about two because they were both pretty fun. I did one was called Riding the Rails with the Mayors. And what that was riding the light rail with several other mayors from other cities. And I'm bringing that up because I was in absolute awe of the amount of construction and new development going on in our city. Each one of those mayors would give us a lecture on different spots around the area, and it made me appreciate the fact that we have a commuter rail here, and the fact that Colorado is growing like crazy, just growing like crazy. So we have a lot of opportunity here. And the other one was packing grocery bags. Mr. Goff was trying to make it to help with a fundraiser for the food bank. So down the rail it comes, and your little mayor was throwing it into the bags as fast as I could to help with the cause. Did that with a few other public officials, county commissioners. It was a lot of fun. So if that stuff comes up, I want to remind you, and I hope you'll join me in some of the other ones because they're really, really fun and gives you a nice sense of being a part of the community. That's it. Good night.